33 kilometers wide. That's the entire gap between Iran and Oman, the Strait of Hormuz, where 1/5 of the world's oil squeezes through every single day. And right now, a tanker is burning in the middle of it. Dozens of ships sit parked on either side, engines idling, crews waiting, nobody moves. Within hours, oil rips past $90 a barrel. Within days, 126. 20% of global supply doesn't slowly decline. It vanishes overnight. Here's what no one talks about. The cheapest oil in the world becomes irrelevant if it cannot be delivered. This was never a political failure. It's a geometric one. Now, there is one coastline on this planet that bypasses every single conflict corridor with a direct open water Pacific route straight to Asia's biggest energy buyers. It's ours. But before we get there, the so-called backup pipelines the Middle East has been counting on, they're a fatal illusion. Here's the math. The Strait of Hormuz, the passage everyone assumes will just stay open, is between 33 and 54 kilometers wide at its narrowest navigable point. You could almost see one shore from the other on a clear day. And through that sliver of ocean, according to U.S. EIA data from the first half of 2020, an average of 20.9 million barrels of oil moved every single day, roughly 1 in every 5 barrels produced on Earth, squeezed through a keyhole. In March 2026, when the crisis escalated, that keyhole slammed shut. The IEA oil market report documented the collapse in plain numbers. Throughput plunged from over 20 million barrels per day to just 3.8 million. In a matter of days, 17 million barrels of daily flow, gone. At first glance, this is where you'd stop worrying. You've heard about the backup pipelines. Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline can reroute crude to the Red Sea coast. The UAE's ADCOP line runs to Fujairah port on the Gulf of Oman, bypassing the strait entirely. A few smaller lines are scattered across the region. Front door blocked. Take the back door. Let's see if that back door actually opens. Bloomberg and Al Jazeera's 26 analysis puts the combined maximum capacity of every bypass pipeline in the region at roughly 8.5 to 9 million barrels per day. That's the ceiling. Every pipe running at absolute peak. Zero maintenance windows, zero terminal bottlenecks, perfect political coordination across rival governments. 9 million barrels against a normal daily flow of 20.9 million. That's 43% under real-world stress. Where infrastructure degrades, loading docks jam, and coordination between rival states frays, analysts put the effective throughput closer to 30%. So you're left with a gap of at least 12 million barrels per day that has physically nowhere to go. No pipe to carry it, no port to load it, no tanker route to move it. That's where supply chain physics takes over. When oil can't move downstream, it backs up into storage terminals, into processing facilities, eventually into the production wells themselves. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, have finite tank capacity. Once those tanks fill, the wells have to close. According to US EIA data, Gulf producers are forced to shut in between 7.5 and 11 million barrels per day of output, not by strategic choice, by physics. There is simply no room left to put the crude. Qatar's energy minister stated it directly. Land routes alone cannot solve the systemic gridlock. Countries with some of the cheapest extraction costs on Earth, sitting on the largest proven reserves humanity has ever mapped, shutting off their own wells because their own geography will not let them ship. Now follow that chain one step further. Nearly half the world's seaborne crude vanishes from loading docks, but the paper contracts written against those barrels don't vanish with them. Futures commitments, forward delivery agreements, supply contracts that refineries across Asia and Europe signed months in advance, they all come due. Sellers cannot deliver physical crude because there are no tankers to load and no open route to load them on. Buyers invoke force majeure. Counterparties default. And because benchmark prices like Brent and Dubai Mercantile are ultimately anchored to physical cargoes actually changing hands at real terminals, those benchmarks lose their reference point. When the physical barrels underneath a pricing system disappear, the price doesn't just spike. It detaches from any measurable reality. Contracts stop reflecting supply and demand and start reflecting pure panic. The pricing architecture that underwrites global energy trade doesn't wobble, it breaks. The Middle East cannot rescue itself from its own map. And that realization that there is no plan B inside the region, it forces the most desperate energy importers on the planet to ask one very specific question. Economies that depend on foreign crude for over 70% of their supply need to know. Is there a coastline on Earth that cannot be blockaded? A shipping lane that never passes through someone else's choke point? There is exactly one coordinate that answers both questions. Canada's Pacific coastline. Thousands of kilometers of deep water access stretching from the Alaska border down to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, opening directly onto the largest ocean on Earth. No choke point, no strait controlled by a hostile neighbor, no bottleneck where a single missile can shut down 20% of global energy flow. Just open water, all the way to Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai. Now here's the cognitive pivot most analysts miss. We obsess over price per barrel, Brent crude, WTI spreads, OPEC production quotas. Financial media trains us to watch the ticker. But pause on that, because this is where conventional economic thinking collapses. When 20% of a nation's energy supply is physically trapped behind a naval blockade, the cheapest barrel on the planet doesn't keep hospitals running. It doesn't keep steel mills online. Forget in production volumes. Geography decides the winners and losers in real time. You are no longer purchasing a commodity at that point. You are paying a premium for the physical certainty that it actually arrives at your port. Oil is just the label on the invoice. The real product is geography, and geography is the one asset no central bank can print, no military can reposition, and no diplomatic summit can redraw. This is what I call the geographic hedge. Think of it the way a portfolio manager thinks about a hedge position. During calm markets, a hedge looks boring, almost wasteful. It just sits there in your portfolio, costing you a small carry fee, doing apparently nothing. But the moment markets crash, that boring position becomes the single most valuable line item you own. It pays out precisely when everything else is bleeding. Canada's map operates on identical logic. Thousands of kilometers of granite, boreal forest, and open ocean separating us from every active conflict corridor on the planet. During peacetime, that distance looks like isolation, a logistical disadvantage even. But the instant the Strait of Hormuz closes, the instant tanker insurance through the Persian Gulf becomes economically ruinous. That so-called isolation transforms into the most valuable strategic asset on the global energy board. It pays out massive premiums exactly when the world is desperate. And unlike any financial instrument, this hedge has no expiration date. It cannot be unwound. It cannot be counterfeited. The Rocky Mountains and the Pacific Ocean are permanent infrastructure. Now, the hedge analogy is clean, but it only matters if the throughput exists to act on it. In 2024, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, TMX-Saugor, became fully operational, increasing heavy crude export capacity to approximately 890,000 barrels per day, flowing directly from Alberta's oil sands to marine terminals on the British Columbia coast. From those terminals, tankers load and sail straight across the Pacific. No Suez Canal, no Strait of Malacca, no war zone insurance surcharges. The cargo crosses open ocean and docks in Asia. That is delivery certainty no Middle Eastern route can replicate right now. We have always been told the Middle East holds all the energy cards. Worth asking yourself, before this breakdown, did you file Canada's geographic distance under disadvantage or structural asset? Most people pick the wrong column, so we have the framework, we have the pipeline capacity, but frameworks in steel only matter if buyers are willing to commit capital. And this is where the pictures sharpen, because the largest energy importers in Asia are not browsing. They are already quietly redirecting billions to physically lock in these Pacific routes for the long term. The scale of what they are committing might genuinely reshape how you see Canada's next 20 years. 89%. According to US EIA data, 89% of the crude oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz is headed for Asia. That single number tells you everything about who has the most to lose and the most reason to act. Japan and South Korea source between 80 and 90% of their total crude imports through that corridor. China pushes roughly 40% of its crude through that same strait. These aren't marginal exposures. They're existential ones. If Hormuz closes for any sustained period, the second and third largest economies in the world don't just experience price spikes. Their industrial base physically grinds to a halt. So when you see capital moving at this scale, understand the motivation. This is survival math. And the math is already producing results. According to RBN Energy's 2025-2026 analysis, Chinese refiners have aggressively pivoted to Canadian heavy crude. Specifically, the diluted bitumen and partial upgraded blends now flowing through TMX to British Columbia's coast. Here's the part most people miss. This pivot has nothing to do with diplomacy or goodwill. It's pure hardware economics. Think of it this way. Asian mega refineries, especially the ones along China's eastern seaboard, were physically built to process heavy, sour crude. Their distillation columns, their cokers, their desulfurization units, all calibrated for exactly that feedstock. Canadian heavy crude slots into that machinery like a key into a lock. The result? What the industry calls stronger netback prices. In plain terms, after you subtract every dollar of shipping, processing, and logistics cost, the profit margin on a barrel of Canadian crude delivered to a Chinese refinery is actually higher than a barrel shipped from the US Gulf Coast. Chinese buyers aren't doing Canada a diplomatic favor. They're making a cold, calculated, highly profitable economic choice. And the volumes prove it. Shipments from Canada to China have surged, substituting roughly 90% of equivalent U.S. crude imports into those same refining facilities. Temporary hedges unwind when a crisis passes. This won't unwind. The hardware fit is permanent. Now multiply that logic across the entire energy spectrum. The natural gas build-out on Canada's Pacific coast is scaling at a pace that capital markets rarely greenlight unless the long-term demand signal is overwhelming. LNG Canada Phase 2 alone doubles capacity to 28 million tons per annum. Stack on KSI Leesam's LNG at 12 million tons. Add Cedar LNG on top. According to Norton Rose Fulbright and Enverus projections from 2026, Canada's total Pacific LNG export capacity is on track to shatter 40 to 45 million tons per annum by the early 2030s. Let that number land. 45 million tons of liquefied natural gas every single year. Flowing west across the Pacific on routes that never touch a contested strait, never pass within range of a hostile navy, never depend on a single choke point remaining open. That kind of capacity doesn't get financed on speculation. It gets financed because the buyers on the other end have already signed long-term offtake contracts, binding commitments that lock supplier to customer for decades. Capital markets are casting a vote with billions of dollars, and the ballot reads the same every time. Permanently institutionalize the Canadian Pacific route as a primary energy artery for Asia. But here's what makes this story cut closest to home. All of that Asian capital, all of those long-term contracts, all of that infrastructure being poured into Canada's western coast doesn't just solve Asia's supply chain vulnerability. It quietly begins to dismantle something that has constrained this country for generations, our near total dependence on a single export market to the south. What that unlocks for Canada's own economic sovereignty is where this gets personal. Here's what that capital commitment looks like when it hits the domestic economy. Scale the LNG infrastructure to 56 million tons per annum, which is exactly where the current project pipeline is heading. And the Conference Board of Canada projects an annual GDP increase of $11 billion, not a one-time bump, $11 billion recurring every single year. That sustains over 96,000 jobs across the supply chain and generates more than $2 billion annually in additional taxes and royalties for federal and provincial governments. Asian demand locks in long-term offtake contracts. Those contracts justify the massive infrastructure build-out, the LNG plants, the feeder pipelines, the port expansions. That scaling creates tens of thousands of positions. Engineers, welders, logistics operators, port workers, environmental consultants. Their wages circulate through local economies. Their taxes and royalties feed back into the national capital base. Export demand converts directly into systemic domestic resilience. But the deeper transformation here is structural, and it rewires a vulnerability that has quietly shaped Canadian trade policy for decades. Canada's energy exports have been funneled almost exclusively southward. One direction, one buyer, the United States. When you sell 70-80% of your most valuable commodity to a single customer, that customer sets the terms. They dictate the price discount. They use access as leverage, the NAFTA renegotiations, the softwood lumber disputes, the steel and aluminum tariffs. Every time Canada sat down at that table with a structurally weak hand, because where else were we going to send the oil? Into a landlocked pipeline that dead-ended at the Gulf Coast. The Pacific changes that equation permanently. As TC Energy's own executives have stated publicly, tripling non-US bound crude and LNG exports fundamentally rewires Canada's trade paradigm. When Japan, South Korea, and China are competing for your product through contracts that span decades, the leverage equation inverts. You go from being a captive supplier, stuck negotiating through someone else's backyard, to a sovereign exporter with multiple bidders on multiple oceans. Picture the next round of bilateral trade friction with Washington. Any administration. The next time energy dependency gets floated as a pressure point, Canada can gesture toward a fully operational Pacific corridor moving nearly 1 million barrels a day of crude and tens of millions of tons of LNG to buyers who have already paid to lock in that supply. That is a structural negotiating position backed by physical infrastructure and binding contracts. It changes the math in every room Ottawa enters, and here is what makes this more than projection. The disruption in the Middle East has already caused existing Canadian infrastructure to ramp up to full capacity, not hypothetically, not in a planning document, right now. The geographic hedge is not a theory waiting for validation. It is operational, stress-tested by the exact scenario it was designed to address. It is generating $11 billion a year in GDP. It is employing nearly 100,000 people. And it is delivering something no trade deal or diplomatic summit ever could. Genuine, durable, geography-backed strategic independence. Canada's geography, the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific coastline, the sheer distance from the world's conflict zones, was always the asset. It just took the board shifting to make the math undeniable. Subscribe, because the energy map is still being redrawn, and the structural moves coming next are just as consequential.